Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second of our Ask the Engineer sessions looking at the COP26 summit, which started this week in Glasgow. Now, global leaders are meeting as we speak to agree on the targets and mechanisms for limiting global carbon emissions. We're delighted to be working with Arup as our technical partner for these discussions. Arup is synonymous with leading engineering design as it aims to shape a better world. Today also happens to be This is Engineering Day. This is a day created by the Royal Academy of Engineering to celebrate and raise awareness of the importance of engineering in our daily lives. And this couldn't be more relevant this week. From developing clean energy and transport solutions to designing buildings to be resilient to extreme weather, engineers will be essential to helping us to respond to and deal with the challenges posed by climate change. As we saw in the film just now, there are so many different ways that engineers are already working towards a more sustainable future, with the crucial goal of reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050. But what will these green jobs be, and what skills are they going to need? Where will they be, and what exactly will they be doing? We're going to be exploring all of that today in the UK and around the world. We'll also be taking your questions to our panel. If you want to submit a question, just type it into the live chat box on the right of your screen. You'll need to sign up, and if you haven't done so already, and you also need the full instructions are on how to do this are in the event description on this page too. You can submit questions throughout today's discussion, and we'll then pose as many as we have time for to our panel. So let me introduce the panel today. I'm joined by a fantastic group of people. Dr. Juliet Mian is a civil engineer and director at Arup. She's also leading the technical delivery for the Resilience Shift, a global initiative headed by Arup and Lloyd's Register Foundation to improve the skills and knowledge and build resilience to climate and natural hazards. Ravani Sigamani is a chemical engineer who started her career in platinum mining before moving on to research bioenergy and biofuels for Africa. She's now based in Paris and she runs the UNESCO engineering program. Catherine Smith studied aeronautical engineering and is now a subsea risers engineer at BP. There, she's been part of a project to examine how to reskill as BP transitions to become a net zero company. Dr. Lara Suzuki is head of data and AI at Google, where she works on projects including the interplanetary internet. She's also a professor on smart cities at UCL in London. So welcome to our panel. First, I'm going to ask each member of the panel to answer the key question for today, which is how can we equip today's engineers and the next generation to achieve net zero? So I'm going to come to Dr. Juliet Mian first. Juliet, how would you answer that question if you had with a couple of minutes?
Thanks, Alok. It's not a simple question. I'm quite pleased to be going first with this, but as always, sadly, there's no silver bullet to how we equip engineers. I'll try and answer it from my own perspective, which is I work in infrastructure. I advise clients in the UK and globally, both on delivery of new infrastructure, but also how we manage, operate, and maintain the infrastructure that we already have. So in the infrastructure space, quite some time ago now, there was the infrastructure carbon review in the UK, which gave us four simple rules for how we remove carbon from our infrastructure, or how we reduce carbon from our infrastructure. First one, build nothing. Second one is build less. The third one is build clever. And the fourth one is build efficiently. And essentially, each of those has a reducing impact on how much carbon we can remove. So to come back to the first one, build nothing is somewhat of a radical paradigm shift for us in the working in the built environment. And also, to be fair, it's not an option. We need to also continue to meet the needs of society and the needs of future society. But to me, probably the biggest change is for us as engineers to really question, do we need to build this? Is it the right thing? There's a phrase used by, I think it was the president of the American Society of Civil Engineers, which is, first of all, we need to know that we need to do the right project. Then we need to do it right. And as engineers, we do know how to do things right. But if there was one change I'd want to see, it's why are we building it? Is it the right solution for society? And just stop and ask that question first. And sometimes the answer may be, actually, we don't need to build this. We don't need a bridge for the sake of a bridge. We need a bridge because of the role it provides in connecting communities to their work, to their schools, etc. Thank you.
Okay, Juliet, thank you very much. I'm going to ask Ravani to speak next. So how would you answer that question about the skills we're going to need as we go into this green future?
Well, thanks, Alok. I think, as Juliet said, it's not an easy question, but the first aspect that we need to tackle is education. How do we incorporate climate change education and sustainability at a school level for all young learners and at a more in-depth level for engineers for the future? Policies on climate change education and sustainability need to be incorporated into school curricula and engineering education systems. If we look at the global pandemic at the moment, at its height, we had over 850 million youth and young children, roughly half of the world's population, who had to stay away from school and universities. This has a dire consequence for us, placing a huge strain on schools, on engineering and engineering education systems around the world. We need to ensure that we train the best engineers to tackle the challenges of our current and future problems, as well as climate change. And thus, we need our youth to be equipped with education about climate change and about the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 Agenda, and everything that we are trying to achieve. Young people, we need to start earlier rather than later. So I think it's not only our engineers, it's all young people around the world that would need to know what climate change education is all about so that we can change minds and not only the climate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That was always good to start early with people education, isn't it? Okay, Catherine, you're up next. What would you say are the things we need to do in terms of skills for the next for this environmental challenge?
Thanks, Alok. So historically, nearly all industries have been cost or maybe schedule driven, and the energy industry is no exception. However, we are starting to see a shift where focus is being put in other areas. If we truly care for our planet and want to achieve net zero, then things like reducing methane and other greenhouse gases, enhancing biodiversity, being water positive, and developing a more sustainable supply chain will need to be as prevalent as things like cost and schedule when undertaking big technical projects and challenges. And we do need to make sure that our engineers, both future and current, are equipped to push this agenda. So my answer is slightly similar to Ravani's just now, but we need to identify the future skills needs of the engineering profession, reforming higher education with global sustainability at its core. Universities should be encouraged to reevaluate their value proposition to take advantage of the growing shift in young people's views of global issues, as well as offering alternative teaching models such as blended and distance learning. Now, I've spent the vast majority of this year working with a multidisciplinary team at BP to look at the biggest engineering challenges the company will face over the next decade as we set out to be a net zero company by 2050 or sooner. Now, this team provided leaders at BP with a view of the engineering skills and capacity within the company to support the shift towards green and low carbon energy sources, but while also maintaining our current operational assets too. And finally, and I almost think most importantly, alongside all of this, we need greater diversity, equity, and inclusion within the engineering community. Put simply, we need more engineers from all backgrounds. We need greater female representation, those from ethnic minorities, and more people who are neurodiverse to pursue a career in engineering. And we need those engineers to challenge the status quo, to be inquisitive, and for engineering as a whole to be a more equitable, sustainable, and inclusive environment.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I think we can all agree with that. And last but not least, Lara, tell us your thoughts on the skills needed for the next few decades. Lara, I think you're muted, so you need to unmute yourself.
Apologies.
No, that's all right. That's okay.
Thank you very much for having me here. So more than half of the UK adults, they want to work for a company helping the country to reach net zero. And I think tapping into this motivation is key to mobilize a generation net zero and also to attract that diverse talent, which is quite important, as I said before. We need to commit to revising our discipline level accreditation guidance for universities to make sure that sustainability is a guiding principle of engineering, while still ensuring that graduates they have the technical and the soft skills knowledge needed by employers. And I think we also need a net zero workforce equipped with the right skills and enthusiasm to help us to build cleaner, greener, and sustainable cities. And reaching the UK climate target will require this workforce to combine technical expertise, soft skills, and a passion for climate action. And in the realm of smart cities, we need smart people to help us to bring more electric vehicles on the roads, enable a circular economy, make sure we are powered from renewable energy sources, and introducing lower carbon ways to heat our homes. So we must be collaborating with training providers for new training courses and schemes focusing on sustainability transition skills, and the reform of engineering higher education with a global sustainability at its core offers an opportunity to attract a more diverse cohort into the profession. So I truly believe that a countrywide opportunity demand for net zero roles will be spread across the country and will require those skills that are yet to be teached. And we need to incorporate new entrants, recent graduates, and experienced hires. And over time, the path to net zero will necessitate the creation of new roles based around skills, including carbon capture scientists, clean gas experts, engineering with renewable energy skills, data scientists, AI experts. And I think that investing the retention and retraining and working collaborative with government and unions, the sector can help to ensure a fair net zero transition, one in which its workers of all ages and background from every community in the UK can play a part in. So for instance, the National Grid ASO, in partnership with Energy UK, Tech UK, and Ovotech Energy, they recently called on the government to consider developing an international center for AI and climate change, which would act as an innovation hub for AI technology. And AI is set to become an essential tool for reaching net zero, forecasting solar wind power, optimizing the grid, and managing demand-side response, create better logistic and transport systems, and provide clean water and energy and instrument buildings to reduce their carbon footprint. So I truly believe that we have to work on creating the skills, training and retraining our engineers for them to acquire the sustainability skills that will help them to ensure we can reach net zero. Thank you. You're on mute now.
Believe this. I've been, after telling everyone else I'm on mute. Can you believe it? Anyway, after listening to all of you, which I have been doing intently, it's remarkable how few areas are not touched by the need for skills and engineering if we're going to rise to these challenges. It's an amazingly important thing to talk about. If you're just joining this session now, we're talking about the skills needed for net zero, specifically engineering skills. We're going to talk about what green jobs are going to be, what skills are needed, where will they be, what will they be doing. We're going to be exploring all of this in the UK and around the world today. Now, to our panel, let's have a bit of a chat amongst ourselves about some of the issues you have raised. You've given us a huge amount to think about. Let's unpick it. Juliet, your work is centered on resilience to hazards from climate and natural disasters such as earthquakes. What kind of skills do you look for when you're recruiting people to your teams?
Thanks, Alok. Some of the skills that we look for now are, to be honest, skills that I wasn't even aware of at the time when I trained as a civil engineer back in the early 90s. So we're looking for people who understand carbon management. We're looking for people who understand the circular economy, the resources we're using and the sort of whole life cycle of those resources. Climate scientists are a hugely important part of what we do, because the future climate that our infrastructure has to survive in. Ecologists, with the need to build nature into our design, becoming increasingly important. So you can see from that they're not only engineering skills, and I think that's important. We need more engineers, but engineers on our own are not going to solve these challenges. But to take a sort of step above that, I think some of the qualities that we need in the teams we build and the people we work with are around their ability to be flexible, adaptive, resourceful, diverse. And interestingly, we use those phrases also to define the qualities we need in our infrastructure systems. And I think the reason for that commonality is probably the only thing that we are certain about with our future is that it's very uncertain. So we need people who are able to adapt and change. And certainly for me, I mean, I love that. I love the fact that my job is very different to the job that I started doing 20 years ago. And that's the kind of people we need, not engineers who are sort of clinging on to the rule book and how we've always done it, but those who are looking to the future and are really excited about the direction that our profession's going in.
And it's worth saying, isn't it, Juliet, that the things you're talking about in terms of skills, it's one thing to sort of build skills and learn things, but also it's a mindset, isn't it? The engineers have a particular mindset when it comes to solving problems. And you might be a climate scientist, or you might be someone who builds bridges, but actually having an engineering mindset is also quite important, right?
Completely. And the mindset, I think, is key. There's a phrase that we seem to find ourselves using a lot now, a sort of description, which is we need to be systems thinkers. So whilst we do need specialist knowledge, we can't have people who are simply, what I'm going to do here is take out the carbon, because then they're not thinking about nature, they're not thinking about resilience. And this is not my phrase, I borrowed it from someone else, but he said that what we now call systems thinking, probably 150 years ago, when civil engineering was just starting as a profession, we just used to call common sense. In that time, we didn't have people who put themselves in boxes and said, oh, all I do is this particular kind of a bridge.
Okay, thank you. Ravani, you work with engineering communities all over the world. What do you think are the most urgent things that we need to do in terms of priming young people to respond to climate change? How are they doing it?
Yes, so Alok, once again, I think when we look at communities around the world and countries, we look at those that are investing in climate change education, in sustainability, the Sustainable Development Goals, and how they are taking it forward in their communities. Lots of countries had to act on climate change just because it's a necessity as well. And what's most interesting is that many climate vulnerable countries, such as the small island developing states, are leading the way in emission reductions and bold climate change action. And as Mr. Alok Sharma, the president of COP, has said, he called out to world leaders, especially the G20 leaders, at UNESCO headquarters in Paris last month, when he said they need to take lead from these climate vulnerable countries and, who are taking action in the most difficult circumstances to protect the planet and its people. And so at UNESCO, what we are doing is we're also trying to get the youth involved in terms of changing how we think and taking education forward. We need the youth to be involved in the actions of climate change. And so after COP25 in Madrid, UNESCO created the Youth UNESCO Climate Action Network. We call it UCAN. So UCAN is a youth-led network that is meant to be an innovative and comprehensive tool to both strengthen the voices of young people around the world and to tackle climate change by working hand in hand with UNESCO, our member states, and to promote youth climate action. And together with UNESCO designated sites, UNESCO is famous for the World Heritage Sites, as well as our geoparks, which are used where we try to not enforce, but we use the actions of climate change to ensure mitigation. And so we have these youth working together with youth that are affected so that we can all work together in combating climate change.
Thank you, Ravani. Catherine, you're a veteran of the energy industry. Can you, but you're thinking about the future, and especially the future for those industries too. What kinds of skills are useful when you're, say, on an oil platform, and how will those sorts of skills help with, people who want to now then transition to working on renewable energy sources? Just give us a bit of a 101 on that.
Yep, sure. Thanks, Alok. So yes, I've been working in the energy industry for a little over 8 years now, and I often visit operational sites both on and offshore, including overseeing installation of subsea equipment at our North Sea and North African offshore fields. So when I think about it, apart from the obvious things like wearing PPE and having to deal with really large waves, I've never felt like there's much difference between working offshore and being back in the office. There are certainly a lot more similarities than there are differences. However, you probably need, above anything else, and I think I've heard this word before from the panel, is to be adaptable and resilient offshore. Things can go wrong. People can unfortunately get hurt. You can finish a 12-hour shift at midnight and be needed again 2 hours later. But seeing years of design, planning and manufacturing come to fruition and seeing the positive impact our work has on people's lives can be thoroughly rewarding. So at the beginning of today's session, you introduced me as a subsea risers engineer, Alok, and I suspect that very few people actually know what a subsea risers is. So in order to answer the second part of your question, I'm just going to give a brief explanation about what a subsea riser is. If you imagine a platform or a vessel offshore, there will be a whole host of subsea equipment on the seafloor below in order to recover hydrocarbons or oil and gas. And we need a way of transporting that hydrocarbons from the seafloor to the platform. And we do this using subsea risers. It's essentially a bit of pipe. It can be rigid or flexible, suspended through the water column, which will be subjected to the dynamic loading of the waves, the current, the wind, perhaps even the vessel movement. So if you hold that thought, I now want you to imagine an offshore wind turbine, and I conveniently have one behind me. It could be fixed or floating. Either way, that wind turbine tower will be connected back to shore via an electrical cable, which will also be suspended through the water column, very similar to a subsea riser. So although my engineering discipline is very niche, and there are about 20 of us at BP, there is in fact a natural transition for us into the renewables area with very little, if any, retraining required. So talking holistically, I see that for most engineering disciplines, the transition from legacy hydrocarbons projects to low carbon and renewables to be relatively, and I say this lightly, relatively straightforward, albeit of course it will take time. The engineering theory you learn at university remains the same, or largely the same, and the only difference will be is what you apply it to and how you go about applying it.
Well, that all sounds very positive, and we'll touch on some of those issues a bit later too. Lara, let me bring you in here. You talked in your opening remarks about smart cities and how digitalization can reduce emissions. I mean that sounds very sort of intuitive, but can you tell us how smart cities and more access to digital tools can also help to improve the education of people who need to come up with solutions for the future?
Let me try. It's a very tricky and difficult question. Let me try to answer this by first saying that the key to equipping engineers, in my opinion, and the next generation is understanding the challenges that we face. And none of those challenges are new, but they're more pressing for us. And we have to make sure that we address those in order to ensure we have a future better planet. And I like to say that engineers, they are doctors for the world, that we have now to the technologies that we create to solve problems, but we also have to create technology to solve the problems of the technology we create, like many of the generation before us. So I believe that many sectors are facing a retirement crunch, competition from other sectors for talent, and the STEM pipeline remains too small, with women and minority groups still underrepresented. And digital technologies offer a new way of teaching and learning so that we can bring everyone as part of the conversation. So we have amazing platforms offering the trainings one needs to acquire the skills demanded by net zero roles. We also have many tools and techniques available that are open source that people can apply, that study this and apply to help us to solve for climate change. And the need there, we also have to foster collaboration between industry partners, government regulators, trade unions, NGOs, and education institutions, and campaigning groups for us to understand how technology can better serve us as individuals. And only by working partnership on our shared ambition can the UK lead the way in delivering the change the world needs. And the conversations with businesses, government, and unions to encourage cross-sector collaboration can ensure that we can inspire those young people to choose and excel in STEM subject, to understand the tools available for them to build, for instance, an AI system to create a better transportation system, and also to access those tools via digital technologies, via online learning as well. And tap into a career with purpose, showing how a job in technology sector helps to achieve net zero, will attract the talent that we need. It can also motivate and retain existing employees, keeping vital expertise within the sector. And I think that having access to tech test beds, exhibition, and engaging materials for learning using digital technology can sparkle the curiosity of the younger generation. That is what we need to come, because even, especially in diversity, even if all men decided to become engineers, we wouldn't be able to fill out all the positions available that we have in engineering. And by repositioning a job in the engineering sector as a role with a purpose, investing in continuous training and reskilling in tech, and finding new ways to inspire the next generation is what we need to do. So we need to have like people with skills in carbon capture, circular economy, digitization, and data. And using the tools that we have available can help us to build for those particular disciplines, and also to help the technology to benefit from what the world is needing, that is to create new solutions for smart cities, to ensure we have a clean water, clean energy, that we have like we can reduce the amount of carbon emissions that we come from buildings, and build smarter buildings that can also adapt and adjust to the behaviors of humans. I'm not sure whether I answered your question correctly, but I truly believe that we have a huge potential in the application of technology to help us to create a fair transition whereby workers of all ages and background from across the UK can access training and retraining to be part of the net zero workforce.
I think your point is a very strong one, that the workforce that of the future is going to have to be much more diverse if you want the best possible ideas, and actually access to engineering education and skills and all of that is more difficult for some groups than others, and digitalization and electronic learning can possibly help with that. And of course, there are still barriers, but hopefully they will be lower. The issue of green skills, of course, is also going up the political agenda. Last week, there was the first ever debate in the UK Parliament on climate education. Catherine, can I ask you, is there anything you didn't learn at school and university that you'd have found useful at work? Something that you wish you'd been taught?
Yeah, so I love the wording of this question, Alok. And of course, the answer is yes. There were lots of things I didn't learn at school and university, which would have been useful in my career. So from studying maths and physics at A-level to aeronautical engineering at university, I've definitely benefited from having a good engineering academic foundation. However, as I previously alluded to, being an engineer is how you go applying that theory. So although I'm currently a subsea risers engineer, and I see myself as a mechanical engineer first, some of the skills I have are niche and rely on equations that I did learn at university. However, the vast majority of my skill set is highly transferable. Being an engineer is often so much more than purely theory and academia, and I've learned most of the skills I use today on the job. To me, what makes a good engineer are the relationships you build, be that with your immediate team, suppliers, or perhaps partners. Your ability to approach and solve a problem from a different perspective, and even being considerate of other people's cultures and creating an inclusive work environment all fall under the job description of being an engineer at BP, as it does at most other companies. Now, I know that there are a lot of school students on the session today, so I'd like to take this opportunity to give a bit of advice, and that's to anyone considering engineering and who is not sure which specific area to go into, is to do whatever excites you. So I chose aeronautical engineering at university because I loved all things space related, and I still do. But I ended up working, some would say, at the far opposite end of the spectrum in the subsea world. And I've been pleasantly surprised at how similar they are and how easy the transition has been.
So from space to the subsea at the bottom of the ocean, that's quite a journey, Catherine. Well, I could totally, not that anyone's looking for my advice, but going for things that you actually love doing has to be the way forward, because you've got to do it in extreme detail at universities for a long time, so you've got to love it to some extent. Juliet, is there a danger that addressing climate change and sustainability in the way that in the way that companies like BP or Arup or huge corporates and things are doing, can it be seen by cynics as a bit of a tick box exercise in education? I mean, of course you want the best possible people, and of course you want skills for the future, but how do you assure people that this is something that is transitioning and transforming your companies rather than just something that you feel that you have to do to look good?
It's a good question, and I think if it is seen as a tick box exercise, then we're doing something wrong, both as companies and as universities. Because absolutely the issues of sustainability, of net zero, of dealing with climate change shouldn't be put in one particular box. If we're at university, there shouldn't be one course on sustainability. It needs to come through everything that we do. And I think that's the big change. We're not bringing a sort of individual sustainability or carbon specialists into a team. We have to integrate it into everything that we're doing. Certainly in Arup, it's at the heart of everything we do. So we don't have sort of traditionally a strategy might have 5 pillars, and one of those would be sustainability. We now have a strategy that has 4 pillars, none of which is sustainability, because it feeds through everything. And exactly the same way with the work that we've been doing at the Resilience Shift to create a change to deliver resilient infrastructure. We recognize that everything we do has to talk to the whole value chain, from government all the way through to those who use infrastructure, and it has to think about the whole system. So we're not just going in to change one individual part of the system. So it mustn't be seen as a tick box exercise.
I like the fact that sustainability isn't one of your strategy pillars, because to make sure it's there everywhere, you sort of remove it completely from obvious sight. That's actually a very neat solution.
Well, it's still quite visible,
yeah.
but yeah,
no, I know what you mean.
We say that it's everything as opposed to being one particular pillar. Yeah,
it makes sense. Otherwise, it ghettoizes it, right? Ravani, which groups of people around the world do you think that we need to be particularly focusing on when it comes to upskilling?
So when we talk about skills of the future and green skills, I think Juliet mentioned it when she talked about interdisciplinarity, and this is exactly what we need. So it's not a particular group, it's actually everyone that would need the skills of climate change education, sustainability for the future. I think when we look at the future and when we need to change the world, we need to think about how our individual actions, inform what we do and how it affects our environment. And thus, education is the only way that we could change the future. And when we look at the complexities involved in achieving global climate change and sustainability education, we require enhanced progress in providing education, public awareness, and training for all people. And we need to mitigate and adapt to climate change. And such progress will create an informed citizen, a knowledgeable workforce, and enlightened government officials, so that we can work with all aspects of our society together in getting a better future and also with climate change.
Thank you, Ravani. And according to a recent report by the IET, only 7% of UK engineering firms with a sustainability strategy have the skills that they think they need to fulfill it. Lara, can I come to you just to pick up on something you said earlier about the diversity in workforces? You know, you're doing a lot to boost engineering education for women, people with disabilities, and many underrepresented groups. How big a difference do you think a more diverse pool of talent can make if we want to find as many skills as possible to respond to climate change?
Yes, so one of the things that we have to do is to firstly look at how business traditionally they have looking out for people. So traditionally companies, they have taken people and we are like puzzle pieces. Let's think about us as puzzle pieces. Business, they have taken us and trimmed our irregularities so that we could fit in as a perfect rectangle. But then we ended up losing all the great things about an individual. And it's quite difficult for us to work in organizations where we have to check ourselves at the door, because then we cannot bring what is the best that we have inside of ourselves. And to me, it's quite important for us to open the door for diversity and boosting diversity within the sector, all the sectors that we have, because all the sectors will contribute to net zero. So for instance, at Google, we are doing trying to do net zero by applying AI, and we are also applying AI to help with the sustainability of AI, so that when we run AI algorithms, they do not consume so much energy. So boosting the diversity within all the sectors that we have to ensure net zero workforce does not miss out on the best talent for every community. I think that is quite important and is a mission that every company should have. So there's a research done by YouGov on behalf of National Grid, and they found that being part of the solution to tackling climate change is a big untapped motivator for both men and women alike, and also of all ages and background. And by tapping into this powerful driver, the sector can attract a larger, more diverse group of talent recruits and motivate existing employees. And over the next year, there will be countless opportunities to reshape young people's perception of technology sector around net zero. And we have to really embrace that to make sure that we conquer those talents. And this affords the sector a chance to put diversity and inclusion at the heart of its recruitment strategy, opening it up to new voices by drawing on the broadest talent pool possible. And to reach this wildest possible audience, diverse voices in net zero related roles should feature prominently during the COP26 and in the climate debate broadly, because it's like Mary Wilson once said, you cannot be what you cannot see. So we have to make sure that we have people representing us into that, and highlighting more role models to change people's perspective of a job in the sector also helps. So the Royal Academy This is Engineering campaign highlights a greater number of female engineers last year. And research showed that the campaign prompted 19% of students to change their mind about choosing a STEM subject. So by delivering these goals, together we can ensure that people of all ages, genders, and backgrounds from every community across the UK can play a part in the UK net zero workforce. And I think that bringing all those different talents together and bringing them a sense of belonging will help them to apply every single skill they have to their best ability to help us to build a better planet.
Thank you, Laura. We're going to go over to audience questions now. There are already quite a lot that you've sent in. Just to remind you, you can submit your questions in the live chat box on the right. You'll need to sign in if you haven't done so already, and full instructions on how to do all of that and to submit the questions are in the event description. And so do ask away, and we'll try and answer as many of your questions as we can in the final 20 minutes or so of this session. Now, I'm going to bring up the questions, and just a message to our panelists: if you really are burning to answer that one, then do put your hand up, either digitally or physically in the screen. Otherwise, I might just direct them to whoever I think is appropriate. Okay, so here's the first one. How do we ensure that all engineers, not just professionally registered ones, carry out the appropriate training and continuing professional development that we need for green skills? Should it become something that's mandatory? How do you make sure that everyone takes it seriously? Juliet, I wonder if you have any thoughts on this, because you do have a lot of engineers that you probably have to train. So I wonder if there are lessons we could learn from a big company like yours.
Yes, and I must say that having the professional qualification and that kind of training structure helps. But I think the other part of it is, for all of us as engineers, we should never assume that we're done, that we've done all the training that we need to do. And again, within our professional qualifications, we have continual professional development that kind of answers that. But I think that's important for everyone. To coming back to, and I think Catherine made this point really well, we do have the skills, but we also need to change. And I think for any of us, if we think we've learned everything we need to learn about engineering, then we should get our coats and be done, because that's not what the profession is about. So some way of building in the need to change, permanently acquire new skills, and that in a way then deals with that, the 7% from the IET. That's only bad news if you assume that the 93% aren't able to change and acquire new skills. And I'd just like Catherine, I'd be much more optimistic that we can.
Does anyone else want to add to that at all? I mean, have any thoughts on this? I feel like education, which is something that you've all talked about very eloquently, it seems like it starts with the education, isn't it? That if you're educated to understand that you're going to constantly have to learn, then this is something that will just happen, that you will constantly try and learn, because new solutions will come up. Okay, well, let's move on to another question, which I think is really interesting. Is automation, asks a viewer, is automation really a green solution? Don't robots and AI use much more energy than human workers, especially if you include data storage? I feel like this is a question directed at Lara, or at least I'm going to direct it at Lara. What's your answer to that? It's an interesting point.
I think that automation, they can help to save energy, and in a way that when we think about automation, we are removing from humans the work that we have to do on a manual basis. And that would waste a lot of time for humans. Humans would be on that task for longer, consuming more computer power if you're doing sorting data on a computer yourself. So you're going to have to do that. And an automation process could do that much faster. And the AI, for instance, pattern recognition. AI is really good for pattern recognition and can do that very, very fast. And then if we do it ourselves, we are going to consume more energy by having to look at images manually and keep looking at this and not maximizing something for you to try to identify those patterns. So I see that we got much better with algorithms for us to do AI, but I think the secret is to understand, do you have a problem that needs automation? Do you have a problem that needs AI? Because you also have to look at the trade-off of how much energy you're going to consume, how much time it's going to take, so that you can understand what is best to apply here. And I think that applying the wrong algorithm to solve the wrong problem is what might create like a waste of energy and resources. So we have to be very mindful about the technologies that we use and the type of automation we put into place. But I truly believe that automation and AI, when done properly, can really help us to achieve a greener and more faster and sustainable planet.
I mean, it's worth saying that, data centers, AI algorithms, all of these things do take up a lot of energy and the huge amounts of electricity. And that's something to be mindful of. But that energy could also be renewable. It could be something that is greener. So it's not necessarily, not a green solution to use automation and AI and all of these things, on top of everything else that you said about making sure you use the right solution.
And also, just to add into that, so for instance, Google, we use a lot of renewable energy. So we are the cleanest cloud available on the market. And then we have every single thing you do on our technologies on our Google Cloud is green by default, so that can help with organizations. And I think every single cloud provider should make sure that their data centers, they are green, so that whenever people adopt their cloud services, it's going to be contributing to the organization's agenda on climate change.
Thank you, Laura. A question for Ravani. there's two questions here which I'm going to put together for you. The question is, has any consideration been given to the UNESCO Education for Sustainable Development competencies and how we ensure our engineers of the future are equipped with them? Systems thinking, says our correspondent, is just one of those. And then allied to that, I wonder if you could also think about this question, which is, do you think a university degree will become more or less necessary in the future?
Very interesting questions. With respect to the Education for Sustainable Development program at UNESCO, the science sector, where the engineering program is set, we work hand in hand with our education sector. And this is where we are developing policies for education of climate change. And this is why I've been stressing it so much about education and policies and climate change education starting at an earlier level as well. So I feel like even into engineering education systems, we need to bring this in. And with respect to the degree, I think that it will always be important, and even in the future. I think that lots of young people are developing new skills online, which is great because there's a lot of independent learning that happens. But I think in the same sense, we still need the structure of institutions. We need, when we look at engineers, the engineering degree teaches people to be problem solving, to come up with solutions. And we need these kind of structures and this kind of education on top of what young people are doing with their online learning for the future. So I think degrees are always needed. I think education will always be needed. I think the way that education is taught, though, and that our typical university campus will change in that we'll have more blended learning with more online learning and people going to campuses, and thus this would change. But I think education and the degree will always be important for the future.
Yeah, another question, and this one I'm going to ask Catherine. A questioner asks, are green skills not the same as traditional skills, just applied in different contexts? I think you touched on this when you talked about transitioning, but can you explore that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I completely agree with the statement. I do see myself being quite easily able to transition into kind of low carbon and green projects. But I think Juliet touched on this a little bit earlier as well. I think as we kind of transition, we're going to need to tap on different resources that we previously perhaps haven't. So from an environmental point of view, I might not have the skills to know enough about biodiversity or how we go about being water positive or what kind of other impacts a project may have on the environment. So I think to answer the question shortly, yes, engineers can definitely transition, but I think we're going to need to kind of tap on other resources going forward.
Thank you. Juliet, two questions I'm going to put together for you this time. You said that in your opening remarks that perhaps one of the decisions we might need to make to be more green in the future is, do you think a particular bridge or a particular building is actually necessary? So someone asks, how do you teach people to decide whether a new building is necessary or not? And another question which is linked to that, but it's a more general one, how do you think that construction and design companies like yours are going to balance whether or not they should start building projects with other responsibilities you have, to employees, to shareholders, the need to have profits? How do you balance all of that together?
Thank you. Excellent questions. I'll try and pick up on them both. So the skills that we need to say, is a bridge or a building or a particular piece of infrastructure necessary? I think that's a good example of what Catherine was talking about. We do need to bring other people in. There's an important part of what the work that we do and the sort of solutions that we deliver is the social value. So social value isn't really an engineering question, but it's like, what are the needs of the community and how is this helping? For me, with the work that I do, particularly in resilience and climate resilience, again, there's two parts to the question. One is, can we deliver, say, a road that will continue to function in the face of a changing climate? But the first part of that question is, does this road help the community? Is it actually providing sort of connections to market, connections to jobs that wouldn't be there because of climate change, or is it purely for economic development? So I think it's a good example of additional skills that we need, and questions that need to be asked much further upstream. For us, again, as engineers, to do the right projects, by the time a project comes out to procurement for something for Arup to design, it is what it is. So how do we sort of get our influence and our thinking further upstream? The second part about what this means for the future of our companies and the future of our profession, I mean, that's somewhere where I'm very optimistic, because there's a lot of work to do. There's a huge infrastructure gap around the world, and for us to position ourselves in the area of the green, sustainable, nature-based and nature-positive infrastructure, I don't have any concerns that that's going to lead to a sort of shrinking of our profession or shrinking of our company. There's a lot for us to do.
Okay, let's move on to another question. How are your respective organizations reaching out to students in schools and universities, offering them possible routes into the engineering sector? And is there more that could be done? I guess this is a question I'd really like to hear from all of you on, if you have things to say. Lara, maybe you first. How you've already talked a lot about making work groups more diverse and making sure that we have a diverse pool of talent. Let's talk about how your company, Google, for example, is reaching out to students and others to try to encourage them into these sorts of careers.
Yeah, we reach out to schools, we attend exhibitions and career fairs, and we also created a program now for to hire neurodiverse people. So we create those campaigns, and we run a lot of events for women in tech and for people from diverse background in tech as well. And I think the latest thing that we did that is quite fantastic is this ability to hire people from neurodiverse backgrounds, and also demystify the issues that people see around people with invisible disabilities. So Google is quite good at hiring people with disabilities, and going through career events, talking to school, having partnerships with other organizations and NGOs. So we really go out there to try to find the talents that can make our workforce much better. So we really try to tap into those and create those programs that people can apply and to join our organization, like an apprenticeship. So we have apprentices, we have people doing internships. We also have programs for people from diverse background also to apply. And also we have awards that we give to people so that they can also use that to ensure they can get a good employment in the future as well.
Thank you, Lara. What about your company, Catherine? And again, what kinds of things are you trying to do to encourage people into a more diverse set of people into these careers?
Yeah, sure. So we do lots of things at schools and university level. I myself tend to focus more on the school side of things. So we go out to local schools in the area, which typically are kind of coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, to try and promote engineering and actually educate both students and teachers and parents about what it is to be an engineer. Because I know myself, when I was at school, I kind of said to my teachers, oh, I want to be an engineer. And to quote one of my teachers, I got told, why would you want to be an engineer? It's a dirty man's job. So I think there needs to be a whole host of education across the spectrum. So not just looking at students, it's how we also educate our teachers as well, so that they're aware about what a career in engineering can look like. So we do a whole host of things like fun activities, like in primary schools, where we just go and build kind of bridges out of marshmallows and spaghetti. But then we kind of go right the way through up to kind of A levels, where we are trying to help students kind of pinpoint the exact parts of engineering that they may be interested in. We also do a lot of mentoring. So I've kind of signed up to a couple of mentoring schemes that BP supports. And then at the university level, we obviously go and do our kind of recruitment drives. But we have a lot of relationships with various universities up and down the country to try and promote engineering careers within the energy sector, and to kind of show the spread of career opportunities that you can have.
Very interesting, and there's it sounds like there's lots more opportunities to go with that as well. Ravani, you know, you're kind of at the others on the other side of this. How do you encourage more people to sort of take up these things just in general, and raise their ambitions a bit to go into these sorts of sectors?
Yes, so the mandate of the UNESCO Engineering Project, well, one of the mandates is to get more young people, especially young women, into engineering. And UNESCO has two global priorities, one being gender equality and the other being Africa. So we really try and encourage young people and young women to go into engineering. And one of the ways is we have the UNESCO Africa Engineering Week, where it's now in its 7th year in Africa, where it's moved to different countries on the continent, and it encourages all engineering students as well as parents and civil society to know what engineering is, to get more young people in, and even professional engineers to participate. And then we have World Engineering Day, which was its 2nd year this year on the 4th of March. And this is also another international global event that UNESCO organizes with our partners to encourage more young people to think about engineering, to know what engineering jobs are about, what engineering skills are about. And then we have on the ground, we have STEM boot camps, working with partners to go to schools and young people. We work with universities through the UNESCO's Chairs Network, where we have around 200 science and engineering chairs. And then we have UNESCO Category 2 centers working with governments. And 5 of these are particularly concentrated on engineering education.
That's fascinating. And last but not least, Juliet, I mean, you must have all sorts of programs, and you've talked about a lot of this already, so I don't want you to necessarily go over all of that again, but is there anything else you'd like to add that your company's doing?
Well, the only thing I was going to say actually is because, yeah, very similar to what everyone else has been saying, the one door that's very firmly closed to me that I keep offering is to go into my daughter's school to talk about engineering, and she's so mortified at the thought of that that's not going to happen.
Okay, well, you can keep trying. Maybe she can go on a field trip one day or something. Yeah, that sounds like an amazing thing. Okay, so another question. Let's go for some more questions. Okay, let us think here. There's quite a few questions. I'm just going to scan them over to see which ones we can have time for in the last few minutes. The jobs that today's school students will be doing. Oh, hang on. No, final question I've been told. This should be the final question. Here we go. What net zero job would you really like to do in the future? All right. We've got 1 minute to do this. We've got 30 seconds each. How about you, Lara? What net zero job would you really like to do in the future?
I am hoping to be able to create sustainability by AI. That is like helping AI to make AI algorithms much more sustainable, so it can be useful and usable by people like much better, and make it more accessible as well.
Okay, very good. Catherine?
So I want to work on offshore wind farms, hence the offshore wind turbine behind me. I've come from an aeronautical background, kind of found myself in the energy industry, and actually, if you think about the aerofoil on a wind turbine, it's very similar to what I learned at university, so I feel like I've come full circle. So yeah, hoping to shift into the offshore wind market soon.
Thank you. Ravani, how about you?
In the future, if I could, I would like to be an engineering professor, to work on engineering and climate change at university, but also then to work with government to try and change how we're doing it. And so engineering could also change in what we do and how we achieve our goals.
And Julia, I feel like you're already working in a kind of a net zero job, but why don't you think about an even more futuristic one?
For the future, maybe it's not futuristic enough, but nature-based solutions. So working with nature to provide the services that we traditionally would have done with hard engineering solutions.
All right, well, thank you all. There are so many more questions, but we've actually run out of time, which just goes to show how many people are interested in these sorts of topics. So it's really wonderful that you've all spent your time going through all of these with us. So that's all we have time for today, but we will pick up our discussion again next week on Tuesday, the 9th of November at 6:30 p.m. GMT. What we're discussing is hydrogen, the silver bullet to achieve net zero. And you can see how to register via the link in the chat right now. There's also a link in the chat to a brief follow-up survey of this event. And this link will also be shared in an email. And thank you in advance for your feedback. It always helps make these events much better. If you've been inspired by today's event and want to keep the discussion about engineering skills and net zero going, make sure to follow the This is Engineering Day conversation on social media. Share your vision of how engineers can contribute to a net zero future using the hashtags This is Engineering Day and the hashtag Engineering the Future. Right, it just remains for me to thank our excellent panel today for answering all your questions, and you know, I'm sure they'll be thinking about this for a long time going forward as well. Lara, Ravani, Juliet, and Catherine, thank you all so much for your time. You're busy people, so really appreciate it. And don't forget to have a look at all the resources online for This is Engineering Day today to get you thinking more about how engineers can help in providing sustainable solutions, including a new exhibition in the Museum of Engineering. Thank you to the Royal Academy of Engineering and to our technology partner, Arup. And we'll see you all again next week on the 9th of November when we'll be talking about hydrogen. Goodbye.